All right, y'all. So I was looking at an article, and the article was talking about Robert Parrish, and I believe somebody had did an interview with him, and he said that Michael Jordan, he don't consider Michael Jordan to be the GOAT. GOAT, the greatest of all time. You know, we use that for people that basically are the greatest of all time in their specific field. So you could be the GOAT of a doctor, you know, a surgeon, a dentist, or whatever. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to pertain to just sports, even though that's the majority of the time where it pertains to. But Robert Parrish says he does not believe that Michael Jordan is the GOAT of basketball. He's put multiple people in front of him. He put, I think it was Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and I believe Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And of course, that was during his era. So I can't be mad, because a lot of times when you hear these discussions, you always hear that Michael Jordan is not the GOAT, or they'll say LeBron James is not the GOAT. They'll say this person not the GOAT, because every era is defending each era. So if you was in the 80s or the 70s, you're going to defend any basketball player in that era and call them the GOAT. So I can't be mad at it. And he said in this interview that he didn't beat any great teams. Now, when he said great teams, he was talking about, you know, the Pistons, from the bad boy Pistons in the 80s. You know, the Lakers when they was, you know, doing their thing, you know, with James, all of them. I'm not going to mention them. I'm going to forget names. And then, of course, the Lakers. I mean, not the Lakers. I said the Lakers. Boston Celtics, which is actually a great team, too, at that time. So he's basically going off of the 80s teams that he didn't really beat, because if anybody know, and you always hear the story that Jordan was getting beat up in the 80s from these great teams, and he was taking losses, and I believe he actually got swept. The Bulls got swept by the Celtics. I can't remember what year it was, but they got swept. So I can understand his argument, but you really can't say 100% that argument is 100% relevant, even though, like I said, each decade and each era of basketball, people that play basketball, they can have these arguments, and there's nothing wrong with it, because at the end of the day, he won six rings. And you know, now one thing that I would say, I think this is like when Michael Jordan went and played baseball for whatever was it, 2 years, 3, I don't know how many years he played baseball, but when he had went out and when the Houston Rockets was doing their thing, now I think that Robert Parrish, if he had mentioned that, I think he might have had a very, very good argument, because I think the Houston Rockets, personally, let me get this straight and tell y'all, I believe the Houston Rockets were better than the Bulls. And if they had to do that, if you had to think about that, if you had to put those two matchups together, I think the Houston Rockets probably would have like definitely outplayed the Bulls. Now I understand, Michael Jordan, y'all would say, he the GOAT and everything. But it was just something about the Rockets that, if you go back and look at some of the highlights, the Rockets was giving them trouble. So I can sit up here and kind of vouch for Robert Parrish in certain situations. But like I said, we're going to always have these arguments about who's the GOAT as far as it comes to any sport, and mainly basketball, because we always hear, like, Jordan is always going to be like in that top 5 of people talking about the greatest of all time. And you can, like I said, you can add Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, you can add Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Like I said, I'm missing some people right now from the 80s and 70s right now. You're going to throw Kobe, you're going to throw LeBron in there. And every era is going to be different. Like, you can probably round up 1 million people, and you might have a good percentage that was going to say Michael Jordan, but you definitely going to have other names going to be definitely thrown in there, like the names I mentioned. So at the end of the day, I would not be mad at, I'm not even mad at what he said, because who's to say he's wrong? Because we can sit up there and say, he beat Utah, he beat, as far as Michael Jordan, he beat Utah, he beat Phoenix, he beat Portland, he beat the Lakers at the end of their prime. But could you say this? You can say this too. I believe the Celtics at that time was more of a super team than an actual. If you think about Chicago at one point, it was just Jordan. It wasn't Scottie Pippen. It was just Jordan. So these other teams that Robert Parrish are mentioning, they were actually super teams before super teams. if you want to put it like that. So his argument could go, you know, one or two ways. People could sit up and say, well, y'all guys were super teams. Y'all had, you know, Parrish, mention, think about Parrish, think about Larry Bird, think about McHale. And I was like I said, I can't even mention all the people, because I would, if you was to take the current what was it, the 95, 96 Bulls, and you was to put against that era of the Celtics with Parrish and all of them on there, now that would have been a good look, because I think at the time, if you was to take those two matchups, the Jordan team was Scottie Pippen, Kerr, and all of them, and you was to take the Larry Bird team and take them in their eras, like take the Celtics in the 80s when they was like that, the age and all that stuff, and if you take the Bulls at the age and everything where they was at when they was winning their titles, you put them two teams together and play, I believe he might would have a point, because I think overall, I think the Celtics would have been a better team. When I said a better team, I believe Phil Jackson made the Bulls. Let me say this right. People always gonna say something crazy whenever you say something. But I think Phil Jackson's system might have made the Bulls a lot better than what they currently were before. Of course, adding pieces here and there made sense too. But I think Phil Jackson's system did a lot more to help Jordan out to get in those situations of winning titles. So I would love to hear y'all opinions, y'all comments and everything, because like I said, this story can go back and forth forever, in days and hours. You know, and like I said, I'm not mentioning everything, so it might be some things that I might have forgot that y'all might put in the comments. But leave y'all comments down there, and you know, tell me how y'all feel about it, because like I said, there's so many different ways you can go with this. Peace.